The United States Supreme Court has delivered a landmark ruling, striking down the sweeping tariffs enacted during the Trump administration. This decision will reshape America's economic relationships with the world. For years, these tariffs sparked trade wars, strained alliances, and disrupted global supply chains. Now, the highest court has spoken, and its words will echo from Washington to Beijing. The case was about more than economics. It questioned the very nature of presidential power. The tariffs, justified under national security, faced intense scrutiny. The court's decision sets a new precedent for how future presidents might use, or be prevented from using, similar powers. This is a significant check on executive authority, reasserting Congress's role in international trade. The implications for the balance of power in Washington are immense. The tariffs affected American farmers, manufacturers, and consumers, raising prices and disrupting exports. International companies were forced to rethink their business models, sometimes abandoning the American market. This Supreme Court decision will have real-world consequences for millions, both in the U.S. and abroad. As of September 29, 2025, we are at a pivotal moment. Stock markets are reacting, world leaders are preparing statements, and businesses are scrambling to understand the impact. Will prices fall? Will factories face new challenges? These are the urgent questions ahead. This is a story about law, power, and the interconnectedness of our world. The court has turned a page, and what comes next is still uncertain. To grasp today's ruling, we need to understand tariffs, a tax on imported goods, designed to make foreign products more expensive and encourage domestic purchases. Tariffs have been used for centuries, but they remain controversial. Critics argue they raise consumer prices and provoke retaliation. The Trump administration made tariffs central to its America First agenda, imposing them on steel, aluminum, and hundreds of billions in Chinese goods. National security was cited as justification using Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Many questioned whether these national security claims were valid. China responded with its own tariffs, targeting American agriculture, sparking a U.S.-China trade war. The legal justification for these actions became the central issue. Opponents argued the administration overstepped, bypassing Congress's constitutional authority over trade. Lawsuits from businesses and industry groups followed, claiming irreparable harm. The core question: how much power should the president have over trade? This constitutional debate worked its way through the courts. Ultimately, it was this question, the scope of presidential versus congressional authority, that brought the case to the Supreme Court. The stage was set for a historic decision. The legal battle began with American companies challenging the president's authority under Section 232. They argued that national security was being interpreted too broadly, making the tariffs an unlawful overreach. Lower courts were divided, creating uncertainty for businesses caught in the middle. The turning point came when challengers argued that Congress had given the president a blank check to impose tariffs, an unconstitutional delegation of power. This elevated the case to a major constitutional question about the separation of powers. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, seeking to clarify the limits of presidential authority in trade. Oral arguments focused on the historical context and the consequences of unchecked executive power. The world watched as the court prepared to rule on this critical issue. The Supreme Court's 6-3 decision focused on the constitutional issue of excessive delegation of power. The majority ruled that Section 232 lacked a clear standard to guide the president's actions, making the law too vague. The phrase national security had been stretched so broadly it lost meaning, allowing tariffs for nearly any reason. The court emphasized that Congress, not the president, holds the power to impose taxes and regulate commerce. The ruling invalidates the legal foundation for the Section 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum. While it doesn't directly strike down tariffs on Chinese goods, the precedent is clear: executive authority on trade is now limited. The dissent argued that national security is a political question best left to the president. They warned the ruling could hinder future presidents in genuine crises. But the majority's view now stands, fundamentally altering American trade policy and presidential power. The balance of power has shifted back to Congress. Reaction to the Supreme Court's decision was swift and divided. Congressional leaders who opposed the tariffs called it a victory for the Constitution and American businesses. Supporters of the tariffs, including former President Trump, condemned the ruling as a blow to American workers and national security. The Biden administration issued a cautious statement, reviewing the decision and its implications. Internationally, leaders in Canada and the EU welcomed the ruling as a step toward easing trade tensions. China's response was measured, hoping for a more stable trade relationship. Foreign governments are watching closely to see how the US will implement the decision. The stage is set for new political battles over trade policy. For American businesses, the ruling is a seismic event. Companies relying on imported steel and aluminum expect lower costs and greater competitiveness. Industry groups praise the decision, anticipating new investment and job growth. However, domestic steel and aluminum producers now face renewed foreign competition. Labor unions warn of threats to American jobs and urge new protections. Economists say consumers could benefit from lower prices, though changes may take time to reach store shelves. The financial markets responded with cautious optimism. Manufacturing and retail stocks rose, while steel and aluminum shares fell. The mixed reaction reflects the tariffs' uneven impact across sectors. Overall, removing trade friction is seen as a net positive for the U.S. economy. Investors are watching for signals from the Federal Reserve and the administration. The transition will be closely monitored by businesses and policymakers. The effects will ripple through supply chains and consumer markets. The business landscape is shifting rapidly. The Supreme Court's decision is a global event, not just a domestic one. Allies in Europe, Canada, and Japan see it as a chance to restore cooperation and remove retaliatory tariffs. European leaders hope for a return to a rules-based trading system. For China, the ruling doesn't end the trade war, but it shifts momentum toward negotiation and de-escalation. Developing nations and smaller economies caught in the crossfire welcome the prospect of stability. International organizations like the WTO and IMF see the decision as a step back from global trade conflict. The ruling also impacts global supply chains. Companies may reconsider where they manufacture goods. Some may return to more efficient locations, while others stick with new, resilient supply chains. The global manufacturing landscape is entering a new period of adjustment. The decision could reset U.S. relations with key partners and rivals. The world is watching how America will lead in this new era. The effects will be felt far beyond U.S. borders. A new chapter in global trade is beginning. Experts agree the ruling will be a net positive for the U.S. economy. Removing tariffs is expected to lower costs, boost investment, and spur growth. Legal scholars call it a landmark for the separation of powers, limiting how much authority Congress can delegate to the president. Future presidents will find it harder to impose tariffs unilaterally. Trade policy will shift back to Congress, requiring more negotiation and compromise. This could lead to more moderate, predictable policies. Foreign policy experts say the decision gives the U.S. a chance to repair alliances and address global challenges collectively. The ruling strengthens America's position to work with partners on issues like unfair trade practices. The focus now shifts to Congress and the administration to shape the next phase of trade policy. The decision's impact will be felt for years to come. The U.S. must balance domestic interests with global leadership. The world is watching America's next move. The future of trade is being rewritten. The Supreme Court's decision marks the start of a new era in trade. The Biden administration must now unwind tariffs and negotiate with global partners. Congress faces the challenge of reclaiming its constitutional authority over trade. The coming months will test lawmakers' ability to find bipartisan solutions. For citizens, this is a reminder of how interconnected our world has become. A legal decision in Washington can affect jobs, prices, and livelihoods worldwide. The story is about more than economics. It's about the principles that guide our government. The road ahead will bring winners, losers, and new challenges. Staying informed is more important than ever. As this new chapter begins, the story of global trade is far from over.